So officially, welcome and good evening to everyone. We are starting a new subject tonight. It is called Provide Brief Interventions. A check-in for next Thursday. Next Thursday is the Anzac Day public holiday. We will not have a class. So you can turn up. I won't be here, but it's probably best you don't turn up so you can enjoy your day, whatever that looks like for you. So there will be a recording of what we would have looked at in next week's class, and that should go live on Tuesday, I believe. If it's not there, it will be there, but we won't have our class, and the recording of what we would have covered will be uploaded next week, so you can have a look at that before Thursday, after Thursday, whatever suits you in your learning journey. Would anyone like to open us up and acknowledge or welcome country or your country where you're joining in from today? Open it up to anyone who would like to be in this space. Well, I'll acknowledge the land that I'm joining on, the Dharawal people, and acknowledge elders past, present, emerging, and any Aboriginal peers and colleagues joining us today. I would like to say that we recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first inhabitants of this nation and the traditional custodians of the land on which we work, live, and study. Just acknowledging all the lands we may be meeting on today. Same group rules. I think we have everyone that I've met before, but just yell out if we haven't met. Our class rules remain the same of having our cameras on unless you need to run to the bathroom, you need to yell at a kid or a cat, we're keeping our cameras on and we're being in this class space together. Let's mute our microphones, and then if you want to ask a question or add something, please come off mute and add that. I'm quite okay for that to be done at any point. You may like to wait for a natural break, or you may like to raise your hand in case I don't see that raised hand on screen. Please just jump in when it is necessary or when you want to add something. As always, be very kind to yourself and consider your self-care needs. We are a nighttime class. You may have been working, studying, tending to other things already today. So please just check that you're okay. You've got what you need. I'm okay for you to have your dinner or snacks when you're in the class. And if there's any content or anything spoken about or shared in this class and any class that gives you that ick feeling, please let me know if there's anything I can do. If you need to leave class for a short time, for a long time, for the rest of the class, that is okay. It would be very helpful if you send me a message. You can send it just direct to me, just so I know you're okay. You don't have to go into detail. You might say, wasn't feeling it, I'm going to go off, but I'm okay, and I will go have some dinner now, or whatever it is. So please just let me know if you are disappearing so I know that you're okay. So we kick off with a person-centered practice and what this looks like and what this means. Hopefully by the end, you'll understand supportive and evidence-based practice, positive communication, and the role and scope of brief interventions. There are a few videos in this slide pack. For our class here, we're going to watch this first one, but all the other ones I'll ask you to catch up later on. You'll find them in the slide pack. But I think this one is a really good introduction to where we're going tonight. And just in the interest of time, I'll ask you to watch the other ones later. Just trying to... Okay, so in terms of some key information as we kick off our brief interventions content, almost half of Australian adults will have ill mental health in their lifetime. So 1 in 2. The statistic at the moment is 1 in 2 will experience mental ill health at some point, whether that be directly or indirectly. And the other key statistic here on mental health is 1 in 4 will experience directly a mental health concern in their lifetime as well. So at any given point, statistics says, research says, 1 in 4 of us, of the human population, of the human Australian population, are experiencing mental ill health at any given time. Does anyone want to take a guess at the #1 drug that is of concern for people in Australia? You want to take a guess?
Methamphetamine.
Methamphetamines? No, but it's up there.
Alcohol?
Alcohol, yes. So alcohol is a legal substance for people over the ages of 18. There also comes with restrictions in particular of driving, operating heavy machinery, going into childbirth and so on. But alcohol is the #1 in the 2019 to 2020 period. It was the main drug of concern. I heard methamphetamines, that was the second highest in that period, where people sought treatment for this. Does anyone want to take a guess at #3?
Marijuana.
Yep, perfect. Marijuana comes with lots of names: marijuana, cannabis, MJ. There's, I don't know, 50 different names, I think, for marijuana, pot, and so on. Marijuana is the #1 illicit drug used overall. In this period, though, where people sought treatment, amphetamines was our #1 illicit drug. So it was alcohol, then amphetamines, then cannabis. Cannabis has 2 main parts. It has the stuff that makes you high and the stuff that is more healing. So you've got THC and CBD. Maybe you've heard of this. CBD is the natural component. And if someone is prescribed medicinal marijuana, they're prescribed the CBD. THC, and you can look it up, it's a 3-part name that has about 25 letters in it. I can never pronounce it, but THC is the stuff that adds the hallucinogenic effect. It can also be filled of chemicals, particularly if it's man-made in a lab greenhouse type situation. And that's the stuff that makes you sick. I'm not saying separate it and let's all get on CBD because it's healthy for you and that's the plant. There are reasons and time of use that medical practitioners will determine if CBD is necessary or not for a person. Things like anxiety, cancer treatment, these are typical areas where CBD might be prescribed, but we're talking about intense diagnosis where other areas, other modalities, other medications are not working or haven't worked. So intervention plays a large role in supporting the mental health and the AOD journey of many people. Our services mean meeting people at their most vulnerable. So we are supporting people at their most vulnerable, whether they've elected to come and find support or whether they've been brought along by a family member or they've been designated by your state or territory healthcare laws. People are at their most vulnerable. And we want to provide interventions that are rooted in research and evidence-based practice to support them. You don't need to figure out what those are. You just need to learn about them. Research has been done and continues to be done. When we look at evidence-based practice, it is the core of health practices supporting professionals in your decision-making. It incorporates the best available research. and evidence is integrated in this process, and we're looking at clinical expertise and experience and knowledge of working with clients. And when we look at this evidence-based practice, it takes that research and it puts it into practice, if you have guessed from the name. So we're looking at, this is what's been researched that works well, supposedly. Let's put it into practice. Let's test it. Let's hope it works well. The way we operate in the human services and community services world is the best practice now. In 10 years, maybe something else will have been figured out by then. But everything up until here, hopefully, and most organizations do operate under best practice of what's current. So another video we're going to bypass. Please take a look at that a little later on. So we are trying to establish and maintain and contribute to safe, effective, connected, person-centered community services. When we think about person-centered, this might be a trick question because you might already know the answer, but what does person-centered mean for you? Anyone shout out what person-centered means to you, what you make of it?
Focused on what the client's needs, or
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Daryl.
no worries.
Any other views?
Person-centered, it's around the person's life, their connections to family and community, looking at their health situation, pretty much every aspect of their lives. I think person-centered approach, and looking at the areas that need attention, where they're most at, prioritizing what their needs are, whether they're homeless or unemployed or don't have financial status. I'll leave it
Thank
there.
you, Bill.
I'm not sure.
No, nailed it. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Daryl. You've got it. Person-centered is the person at the center. We encompass and look at everything that concerns that person. And you highlighted financial circumstances, social circumstances, health, well-being, workplace, accommodation, housing, all of these factors, the spiritual factors of a person. If you were in last week's class or you looked at the lecture, we covered Maslow's hierarchy of needs. All of those things contribute to a person-centered approach. Tim, over to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add all of that sort of stuff, but it's just like not one fits all. You know what I mean? It's like everybody has their individual plans and goals and needs and all that sort of stuff. It's not just like, all right, we're going to sit 20 people down and we're going to all do the same thing and expect the same results, sort of thing. You know what I mean?
Excellent. Thank you, Tim. Absolutely right. Healthcare and interventions and approach to medical treatment and non-medical treatment has really evolved over time. Many years ago, it was the one-stop shop of if you were displaying signs of psychosis, you tended to find yourself getting a lobotomy. If you were abusing alcohol and or other drugs, you tended to be imprisoned. That is so far gone, which is wonderful. We've got our new age approach, which is really looking at the person and what their needs are and how can we best intervene for that. So it's not the person matching what we do, it's what we do matching the person. We won't look at this. We're going to keep going. So our person-centered and client-led practice seeks to understand the individual, demonstrates respect for the individual, it's inclusive and accessible, and it focuses on positive outcomes. So we're really considering the person at the core. We recognize that they might know what will help them. They probably know what went wrong or what was a rolling stone of where things haven't been going so well for them. Let's put that front of mind and let's consider that when we look at working with someone and designing interventions. A quote here by Professor Nicholas Proctor. Person-centeredness is about personhood being privileged about anything else. So in other words, when people tell their story, they tell the story of who they are and what they stand for, but also the backstory of how things got to this. Now, a key aspect to consider when we think of clients telling their story is how many times has the client told that story already? You may not, and you probably may not be the first worker to work with a client, and you probably won't be part of the first organization to work with a client. In this course, we'll speak a little bit about multidisciplinary approaches and different people that might be involved in supporting the client. And this will be a common conversation in many of your subjects. So if someone's had to tell one practitioner and then another and then another and then another in the space of the same care plan or over 10, 20 years, people do get tired. People want help, but they do get tired of telling their story. So be mindful when you're getting to know a client, how many times they might have told their story, and how can you make it simpler, easier, more comfortable for them. You want to know what they want to tell you, but how can we do it in a non-interrogative way? How can we do it in a supportive way? How can we read referrals? How can we read documents from other practitioners that we've been given access to better understand the client? It doesn't make up the picture for us. We don't become experts because we've read the referral, but how do we make it more comfortable for the client? There is a podcast here. I'm going to zoom through. We have another approach, which is more often than not incorporated into a person-centered approach. And we touched on strength-based approach last week. So if you haven't watched the recording of the last module of Assess Coexisting Needs, you can watch that. If you're not up to that yet, don't worry, you'll get to that at some point. So here we're looking at engaging positively and recognizing and leading with the person's strengths. It means building on the strengths the person has and using them in a positive and practical way to hopefully work through change. It's important to communicate with the person on progress that's been made and through the lens of their strengths. We want to do with, work with, not for or on or to a client. We're walking alongside them. We have a concept known as unconditional positive regard. This was made famous in the 1960s by Carl Jung, a psychologist, who ascertained that people have their own knowledge and skills within them to go about life that's beneficial for them. Here we recognize other individuals as being the experts of them, and we are along the journey with them to support where we can. Here we're looking at therapeutic conditions of congruence and empathy in order to try and promote change with the client. In this space, clients have the right to their own feelings, thoughts, and ideas. If a person values themselves, they are more confident and motivated to work towards achieving goals. And in that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that self-belief, that self-efficacy, that view of self, that self-esteem, that's quite high in terms of how I see myself, and then how motivated am I to achieve things in life. So people have much more belief than they are capable of, and they may not know it yet. They may need some help uncovering that. In our positive, unconditional, positive regard communication, we've got person first language, and it is non-judgmental. This person first language relates to how we refer to a person. You know, if we were to say John is disabled versus John has a disability. When we say John has a disability, we recognize that John is John and John has something. But when we say John is disabled, he becomes that. He's disabled. There's no more John. It's just disabled. And this language can be downplaying and detrimental to a person's health and mental well-being. Now, certain roles and professionals will say disabled, schizophrenic, autistic, and so on. These are clinical professionals. I don't think anyone in this space, including myself, is a clinical professional, but you tell me otherwise. So let's be mindful of our language. Let's think about John as John, and then John having something else going on. If John had a broken leg, we wouldn't be saying broken leg John. We'd say, oh, John has a broken leg. How'd that happen? Oh, he was mountain biking on the weekend. It was really cool. Look at the footage, right? It's just something. It's there. Some things might be more long-term than others, but recognize people as people, and then an ailment, a health condition after that. We're going to come back to pricing. I think we are going to take a break. So pricing is about the person and how they're feeling about themselves through their internal observation. It's about building internal positivity, and professionals recognize those internal feelings. So pricing points out to a person how they are feeling about themselves through observation. It's not about praise from me as the worker. An individual can begin to feel they identify and prize themselves, building internal positivity. And as workers, we're looking at recognizing that those internal feelings and thoughts of a person and what's inherently good about them, their strengths, and the positive things that make them who they are. So it's not about singing praise. It's not about saying, I am proud of you. Whilst that might be true, and that's perfectly okay and a wonderful feeling to have, we want to remove the I. I am proud of you. I love what you've did. I love what you've done, and so on. It's about recognizing what's going on for the person, what's real for them. And sometimes it's about recognizing hardship that comes with that. For example, something might sound like, you've shared with me that it can be hard to get out of bed, but I see you here at 8 o'clock on time. That must have been a real challenge for you, but also a real strength, and ties into your desire or your beliefs to be here. It can sound like that must have taken a lot of strength to get through that. That must have taken a lot of perseverance. Your perseverance is really showing through your ability to turn up and just stick with it and give everything a go. So we want to take away the I. It might be a I've seen in a behavior, but rather than an I feel or I think. Again, nothing wrong with those thoughts and feelings and expressions, but a client's achievement, a client's personal satisfaction, client's willpower, client's desire, all theirs. All theirs, and we want to recognize that it's all theirs. So if you want to follow along in your learner guide, it's in chapter 1.2. You might find it helpful to have that open as you're going along. I'm going to pop you into a breakout space. Let me just see where we have everyone. we have this concept of active listening. There's a phrase I like to say when we talk about communication and particularly listening. We want to listen to understand, not listen to respond. When we listen to respond, we're trying to figure out and we're trying to plan and we're trying to fix and we're trying to do and get there and help. Most of it comes from a helping place, wonderful place. We're not paying attention though, because we're missing feelings. We're missing deeper meanings that come with what someone might be saying. So don't panic. Don't feel like you need to solve everything. The client's talking to you, listen. Listen to understand. You are perfectly allowed, and you should, and it's very good practice, to ask clarifying questions, not too many, not bang, bang, bang questions. And also be vulnerable yourself and say, I'm not understanding that, or I'm not sure what that means, or could you expand on that a little bit more? I want to hear more, or I don't know what that means for you, or I can't paint a picture, so I want to understand a bit more. We want to actively listen, which is very little talking, no talking. We might have verbal cues of or nods or a lot in our body language. Sometimes we lean in. In communication, you might like to practice and you might just observe naturally in time. We often try to match the other person's body language. So if someone's leaning in, we might lean in a little bit. If someone's leaning out, we might lean in a little bit out. But also we can do the opposite to them. So they might lean in and we might lean out. It takes a bit of skill. It's not a hard skill, but we need to kind of, and this is why it's important to be present and not talk. We want to kind of recognize where a person's at. So if they're leaning in, have a look at their body language, have a look at their facial expression, listen to what they're saying. Do they want us to listen and engage more and be drawn in? Or do they want us to take a step back and feel like they have some power in this situation? Same thing if they're sitting back. Are they inviting us forward? Do they want us to follow them into that story to show that we're interested? So if you've ever looked up, why is my plant leaves going yellow? And sometimes it says it's overwatering or it could be underwatering. Yeah, I'm like, what, which one? Sometimes it's just recognizing in the moment what a client's saying and how they're saying it, how you respond, particularly with your body. Now, hot topic of what we are covering in this subject, brief interventions. So they are a process of screening and assessing a person, particularly during triage for their drug or alcohol use. It is a point. It could also be used on the go. When you start working, if you're in a community setting and maybe you take clients to appointments, car therapy is amazing therapy because you're not looking at a client, you're concentrating on driving, I hope so. And the client has this free range to look wherever they want. They don't have to look you in the eyes. That can be intimidating. They don't have to look you at all. You don't have to look at them. You're busy doing you, and you've got all of your ears working to whatever it is they want to say. So if we look at brief interventions in our screening and assessment space, we're trying to gain information that we can put into place with interventions with a client. We look at what advice or suggestions can we offer. We look at what other referrals can we make. We look at other people in the organization who might be a better support person for them. In terms of our car therapy, this is an opportunistic moment. So it might not be in the car. It might be standing in line at Centrelink. It might be out in the park kicking a ball around. It might be waiting for someone at the gym. They're signing up a new membership. I don't know. Wherever is private and confidential and someone is comfortable, you create a comfortable space, which isn't hard to do. People will naturally fall into that and have that trust and faith in you that they can share and not be judged and not be told and fixed all of their problems, just heard. So In terms of who completes brief interventions, it can be anyone. Now, if we're looking at particular forms and documents, there's a slide coming up of some of the key forms you might use in the AOD space. You might not. So you can, as a non-clinician, you can fill in some of these forms. And also some forms are done by a clinician, a qualified psychologist, psychiatrist, general practitioner, sometimes occupational therapist. There can be a series of tools used, so your forms, your documents. Some organizations have their own goal setting sheets, life charts. What do you want out of life? Different organizations will have different forms and documents there. And particularly if you're working in a hospital setting, there will be a ton of forms that you and medical practitioners will fill out with the client. So what do you think? A question for you guys. What do you think are some of the barriers that might exist when you look at brief interventions? Tim.
Reluctance to change.
Sorry, would like things to change?
Reluctance to change.
Oh, reluctance. Yep.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Peer pressure.
Peer pressure. Wonderful.
Housing or non-housing?
Housing needs. Yeah.
I think certain, like, especially with AOD, it can become somebody's identity. I suppose it sort of ties in with reluctance to change, but you know what I mean? Like, you don't want to lose your identity if you want to give up substances and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. When we talk about behavior change, it's either stopping or starting something. That's the fundamental foundation of behavior change, stop or start. And when we stop, we're taking away AOD use. And for a person that has that tied into identity or just has that tied into lifestyle, doesn't know any different, can't think of anything different, so many reasons. But when we take away, and let's say we're taking away alcohol use, it is a loss. The brain perceives this as a loss. Nobody likes losses. Nobody likes losses. And moving away from alcohol abuse is a good idea, but the brain and the person doesn't see it that way, whether they voice this consciously or unconsciously. So we need to look at ways of supporting the client to gain, to add. So really simply, and this is very much determinant on individual people, but if we want to take away alcohol use, maybe we can add school, education, studies, job, social events, football, painting, music. When we put something in its place, we're not necessarily focusing on the alcohol use being depleted. We're saying, hey, how about we go to this, I don't know, music event on Thursdays at 1 p.m. where you usually drink. Now, this might be challenging at first because they've got a routine, a behavior. But when we've added this successful music event, this person is no longer drinking now at this time. Maybe they're still drinking at other times. Oh, okay, can't look at everything all at once, but we've added something. So sometimes when we look at interventions, and sometimes brief interventions, if we've got a hot minute to kind of help someone through something, we might look at adding something rather than taking away. Cool. So we heard reluctance to change, you know, that might come under lack of confidence or uncertainty. We heard of peer pressure. That might come under uncertainty, lack of confidence, lack of resources. Maybe even difficulty or discomfort. We heard of housing issues, maybe lack of resources. We've also got lack of time, lack of energy, lack of means. It can be very confronting and uncomfortable, as we've established. Maybe the change is too scary. When we make change, the cost-benefit analysis of change has to be with the change. So if changing is too scary, too costly, too emotionally taxing, I'm not going to do it. Because what I know now is fine. It may not be fine, but it's fine. We need to get to a point, if we want to engage in behavior change, everybody, no matter what it is, AOD use, healthy lifestyle, cigarette smoking, whatever. If we want to make that jump to change, the cost benefit analysis of change needs to be higher. So if I stay the same, this is actually going to cost me more. More time, more money, more energy, more risk, more chance of ending up in prison, more chance of ending homeless. So whatever it is, when we're trying to change, the change has to look better, has to look shiny and new. That's how we get there. Maybe we still need work on how to make that change work and how long that takes and how we work through that and everything. That's fine. But to actually make the decision to get to change, to cross the boundary, to go into contemplation, the change needs to look shiny and new and better. When we look at assessing intervention need, hopefully in this little section, we'll look at identifying strengths, issues, and concerns, how we support change, and how we work through health and well-being and asserting awareness. So there's some key points within this section. We look at goals, we look at interests, history and experiences, skills, capabilities, and personal strengths, networks and supports, culture, listening, rapport. All of this falls into assessing intervention need and a client's desire to change and desire to engage in intervention. It's really important we try to understand this. Going back to an earlier point around a client telling their story 12 times, that can be a little bit tricky to try and get out their interests or their history and experiences. You don't have to ask all the questions in the first 5 minutes. You don't even have to ask them all in the first session. Be mindful of the time that you can have with a client. Be always trying to set up the next appointment. So it's not about, oh, we don't have time for this, we'll do it later. It's we have time next time. I don't have to ask all of the questions now because it's confronting, because it's too much, it's overwhelming. I wouldn't like to be bombarded with 20 questions in the first 5 minutes. I'm going to walk away. So I want to have that space where I trust someone and I'm invited in and you're not rushing me to tell my story. There are lots of different resources you can provide to a client and lots of resources the organizations you work with will have or will have access to. You can also do wonderful Google searches, much like some of the points I put in the chat. It was a quick Google search. Now I will put them back in. But don't think that you need everything in your head all at once. It's okay to not know everything or have everything right now in front of you. And it's very humbling if you share to a client, oh, I'm not too sure about that. I don't know that. I will find out for you. I will investigate. I will get back to you. I will see what I can find out. Don't promise that you will solve problems, but promise that you'll get back to them with some information without saying, I promise, but just hold yourself accountable. The information that we want to gather from a person incorporates their home life and environments, their education and employment history, their relationships and sexuality, and their preferred activities. Always have that person-centered and strengths-focused mindset with you. Because when we have that mindset, we're looking towards how to help a client improve their life, improve their circumstances, change behavior for the positive, get back to a healthy person they used to be, get into sport, get back relationships or get relationships again. And I don't mean just intimate, I mean, you know, in a peer circle, in a social circle, in a workplace environment. Always think about how you can support a client with that. Now, it doesn't mean problem solving and thinking, okay, I can get John this job or I can get John this house. No, it's okay. John's expressed to me that housing is a little unstable. I'm going to make sure I keep thinking about that. And then when the time's right, I might present to John, hey, I've seen, I've heard, I've done some research. Can I share it with you? You also want to gather previous or current diagnosis or challenges, general health and nutrition, and current drug use, and also medications they might be on. If a client has been referred to your service, it will come with referral paperwork. Now, that paperwork will usually have a diagnosis: alcoholism, severe anxiety, whatever is relevant. That's there and that's been diagnosed by a medical practitioner, but it's really important to also ask the client, what's going on for you? Why do you think you're here? What made you turn up here today? I noticed your mum brought you in, but what do you think? What do you feel? You know that we're a service around supporting people through AOD rehabilitation. What does that mean for you? People will tell you, yes, I am, or I have, or I do. Some people may not. Some people may not see they have a problem. Some people may not want help. They're in that pre-contemplative. Usually if someone's saying, I don't have a problem and I don't want help, they've been dragged there by someone else. Not a good start. Again, we have to have that internal motivation to change, to want to change. But that's okay. It doesn't stop you having conversation. It doesn't stop you explaining what your service does for people experiencing alcoholism. Not necessarily the person sitting in front of you, because we're taking what they are thinking and what they are feeling. If you do some work in a hospital setting, particularly in a closed ward, or where someone is scheduled, so they're mandated by the legislation of your state or territory to be kept in a hospital. So whether they say, no, I'm not going and I'm kicking and screaming, they will be put into a hospital. Now, if they go kicking and screaming, they will be sedated. They will be potentially tied down for as long as it takes for them to calm down and realize where they are. So if you are in that hospital setting where clients are mandated, be very mindful that they may not want to be there, or they may have been particularly unwell and have been scheduled because they were really unwell. And we're talking about hallucinations or inappropriate behavior or disjointed behavior, displaying lots of things to demonstrate that they're not of sound mind at that time. There is a little video here on the audit. I might see if this one works because this is quite relevant to the work. And there are other tools, but a lot of people use the audit. It can be done by a non-clinician. See if we can get it working. So we looked at the audit and now just showing you a few more examples. You've got the severity of dependence scale, the SDS, the assist light, alcohol, smoking, and substance involvement screening test. The audit C is about engaging people, engaging clients about their alcohol use. So some of the questions are just a little bit different. And we've got the craft. This is for 12 to 21-year-old people, specifically in this young adolescent adult stage. Please have a look at your learner guide, chapter 2, for more information on these different types of tools. Or you can always Google tools, tests, screening tools for alcohol dependence, drug dependence, alcohol and other drugs, whatever keywords you use there. Is that Bill? Just checking if you're chatting to us or somewhere in the background.
Sorry about that.
Oh, I heard some background noise. I thought it might have been coming from you. All
Yeah.
good. Thank you. So we'll skip through research. We've had a look at our tool a little bit. Now, talked about it many times. Just in case you haven't seen the steps, the stages, these are the stages of change. Now, the traditional image is a wheel, a circle, demonstrating arrows moving from pre-contemplation all the way to relapse and back up again. So what this circular image represents is that it keeps going. You don't always have to get to relapse to then get back to pre-contemplation. Someone may never experience relapse or a lapse. Someone may experience that and not need to go through pre-contemplation again. Some people can jump back into action. We've already got the skills, the steps to keep going. They're not going through that process of, do I want to change? Do I not want to change? What does that look like? Some people do. Some people have a relapse and they go, stuff it. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm going to go back to my old ways. I like it, or it was more comfortable. Or remember our new shiny change, which looked good, actually doesn't look that good anymore. It looks a bit scary, looks a bit costly. I don't like it. I'm not doing it. Or I just don't care. And I'm going back to the way I was. And that's fine. So everyone goes through these stages when they engage in behavior change. If you're contemplating or someone has said to you, hey, maybe you should think about not smoking cigarettes. Hey, maybe you should think about joining a gym, doing some exercise. Hey, maybe your work-life balance is a bit out of whack and we'd love you to spend more time at home. In order to make changes, you're going through the cycle of change and you're figuring out where you're at, whether consciously or unconsciously, and you're moving through the stages. So just really quickly, pre-contemplation stage is where someone is not considering change, and I don't consider my behavior problematic. I don't have a reason to change. There is no reason, no desire, no motivation. Contemplation, I'm possibly sitting on the fence and I'm weighing up cost-benefit analysis. If I change, if I stay the same. Our determination or preparation stage is getting ready. So we acknowledge that the behavior is a problem and we need to make change. And maybe we're getting some research, maybe we're seeing a professional. We haven't started yet. We're in that, okay, there's a problem and I'd like to change. Action is all about commitment to change. So somewhere between stage 3 and 4, a person goes, I'm changing, it's happening, I'm doing it, in any kind of words or non-words. So action is commitment to change and the process required to change, and acknowledging that there will be a process and there will be steps and things need to change and working out what that is. Maintenance is where behavior has, sorry, just a moment. Sorry, everyone. Maintenance is where we don't need to consciously think about change and we don't need to consciously think about the steps needed to change. We're doing it. We are getting up early for that exercise routine. We are leaving work on time to spend time with our family. Whatever it is, we're doing it. It's happening. We don't need the constant reminder of step 1, step 2, set your alarm, buy less cigarettes, put the patch on, whatever. And then our last stage is relapse. And this can occur anywhere in action or maintenance where we go back to old behaviors for lots of reasons. They're not one size fits all. It could be someone going to a party and there's drug use and they get coerced, peer pressure. It looks exciting. I remember the smell, the taste, the fun, and I get into it. We can also have a lapse where we're at that party and we take the drugs, but we wake up the next day and we go, you know what, that wasn't a good idea. I don't feel great about that. And I realize how good change was and I want to get back on track. And so some people might just get straight back into action the next day or the day after, and that's okay. And some people might need a bit more help to think about and look at, change what's going well, acknowledge and praise a person where they're at. You've gone 4 months, 2 months, 1 month, 1 week of not using. Amazing. Look at you go. That is all you. How do you feel? How did you feel during it? I know you told me some things were challenging, but I think some things were good as well. Can we talk about that? And then look at, are we getting back on track or are we not? Okay, so another version of what that looks like, but like I said, in its traditional form, it is a circle and it does have arrows that point around. There is a video here. I won't play it now, but please have a look at that later and you'll see the stages of change in more detail.
Hey everybody,
Alrighty. So that brings us to the close of our content and our information tonight. So I'm going to stop the recording now and bid our online learners watching it later farewell.